warm welcome to all those who are joining in person here and all those who are joining us online. Very warm welcome from Pakistan Institute of Development Economics. Um, you all know we talk a lot about climate change, climate impacts, and we are thinking seriously about the consequences of climate change because they are hurting our economy a lot. We talk, our most of the talks focus on the impacts and their economic impacts, but our discussion remain limited on the side how we have to plan economically, financially, and how to predict these natural catastrophes. We faced floods during the past years, and we faced a major flood in 2022 that washed away almost 30% of the country and $15 billion losses. Glacial lake outbursts are other important catastrophics, and there are predictions by the United Nations Development UNDP that these are going to increase, and they have identified many of the sites in GB, and their impacts are disastrous, and frequency has increased during the past year. Climate related events and the intensity of these events has already increased. We faced increased heat waves during past 15 days. We faced two major rainfalls in Islamabad, and those affected a lot. Even the vehicles and solar plates are damaged. So damages, consequences are severe. So this is the time to think about how we should predict, how reliable are these predictions, and how to plan financially and economically um, within the limited space of Pakistan's financial space. For this purpose, today we are collaborating with the National Disaster Risk Management Fund, and we are very thankful that you are taking very proactive steps toward financial and economic planning of these natural catastrophes. So this session will be like, first we have presentations about the natural catastrophe model, and then we will move toward the question and answer session. First, I will invite one of the strongest voices of climate risk management, disaster management, climate finance, the CEO of National Disaster Risk Management Fund, Mr. Bilal Anwar, to have some few words of what is natural catastrophe, what was the need, what is your role, and sir, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And so this is the kind of a crowd, these are the kind of the audience we actually want to interact with, what we are going to be talking about, what we are going to be sharing for NetCat. And why I think so? Well, I think first of all, being an economist and having a very strong role to play into the economic planning and otherwise in the country, I think this is the high time. Maybe I think we are considerably late in terms of exposing and making ourselves educated about the kind of how the role of the technology and the potential of the technology can really play into the economic planning and the financial planning for the country. So I think for you to understand is really important for us. And the technology have certainly moved a lot in the last couple of decades, and it is helping us in so many different ways. It's really up to us how much we want to benefit out of it, how much we want to mainstream and integrate the technology into the decision making process. In the climate change context, is even more critical. It's even more important because we are dealing with a subject matter which is extremely dynamic in its nature. It's changing, and it's changing in a way which is actually producing a number of erratic conditions, whether you're talking about the erratic weather conditions and the implications it can have on the different sectors of the economy. You name it, agriculture or industrialization or any sector of the economy, it has a direct bearing, it has a direct implications on it. So what do we do about it? I think we all, being an economist, we all know that when we are actually undertaking an economic planning, we basically have to look into the level of the uncertainty and the unpredictability. We are very much kind of trained to take these factors into the consideration into the economic planning. But the kind of conditions and the scenarios in which we are right now we are in, I think this has never been the case in the history of economic planning for any kind of a nation. And then it becomes even more critical for a country like Pakistan, which is a frontline state when it comes to the impacts of the climate change. I'm sure you all know about our placement in the global risk index, and we kind of vary from number 1 to number 5 to number 7. And I think regardless whether we are placed at number 7, placed at number 8, I think what is important is that we remain vulnerable, we remain critical, and we basically remain at the forefront of the impacts and the economic implications which we are facing. So this is the context, this is the background in which we are actually surviving ourselves as persons, and then we are actually making the decisions and devising and undertaking taking the research as professionals. And so this is a pretty kind of a gloomy picture, I must say that. And I think it's good to take this, internalize this. If this is the scenario, then what kind of tools or what kind of instruments we have in our hand or in our back pocket. So NetCat is a one such effort by National Disaster Risk Management Fund, and it is basically to equip, to support, to facilitate people like yourself, and how you can actually look into it and how you can integrate into your planning, into your research and development, into your policy making, and in numerous ways. Actually, I mean, there are so many different ways. From simplistic format, it's just a database. It's a data system. It has multiple layers of static data. That's a very simplistic version of it. From a more dynamic uh, point of view, this can be quite powerful. It depends how do you want to use it, how do you want to integrate it, how do you want to internalize it. And I think this is entirely up to us. And we are actually seeing it, and we are trying to integrate it into the different sectors, into different institutions, into different kind of a policy making arenas in a different ways as well. And we want them to kind of look from their own perspective. We do not want, this presentation, this is a very high level version of it. It just gives you a very high level overview of it. What we want from you is you basically analyze, judge it, and review it from your own perspective. कि अगर मुझे एक long term economic planning करनी है और मैं disasters और climate change और adaptation ये सारी financial consideration और financial parameters इसमें डाल रहा हूँ, so then I do not really need to pillar and post. I do not need to go for a data acquisition, which is the number one kind of a headache for the researchers, particularly in this country, because no one want to share the data, even when the data is actually compiled and gathered from the public resources. So I found it a very kind of an interesting attitude, and you're not actually acquiring the data from your own money, but then you treat it like your personal asset as well, because I found it intriguing actually. I worked in a number of countries, but this is something uniquely Pakistani. I haven't seen it anywhere else actually. So anyway, I think so. What we want is this data system have a lot of usability and applications. If you need and if you want us that, okay, we want the curves to be like this, we want this kind of a correlationship, you have missed the interrelationships between the vulnerability between the economic sectors or between the financial implications. We can actually do that. The beauty of having the static layers is, on one hand, yes, it's static layers, but on the other hand, it gives us a lot of power to layer it up with any kind of applications which we want. And we are the owner of this data. So we do not really have to go anywhere. And so we can actually build all these different applications which you want or which anyone want actually. मैं इसी डिस्कशन को जब एग्रीकल्चर वालों के पास जाता हूँ तो आई एक्चुअली कंट्रेक्चुअलाइज इन द एग्रीकल्चर सेक्टर. जब इकोनॉमिक्स वालों के पास आता हूँ तो being a perfect salesman, actually this is what I have learned to do that as well. And I've been successful a little bit actually, day by day I'm getting successful in that as well. But I firmly believe that the system have that power. It's not only the false salesmanship. The system have that power, and actually we can build a number of applications. We can build a number of useful applications out of it. You have to basically tell us what do you want out of it. So the flexibility is there, and it's entirely in our own hands how we want to build the correlationships, interrelationships, interlinkages, and the analytics we want to build on it. I'm sure that this is going to be, once you understand it and you kind of harass us with the request, कि मुझे ये चाहिए, ये चाहिए, ये चाहिए, ये चाहिए. I'm sure that this is going to be beautifully and powerfully enhancing your research. And, I've been in academic sector a little bit, तो आपका impact factor वो काफ़ी increase करवा देगा. मुझे पता है academics को इसके ऊपर बड़ी सख्त तलब होती है, up to the level of भूख होती है. So I think we can help you to increase your impact factor as well. But I think more important is we actually from these kind of institutions, PIDE, we want the policy orientation and the policy responses going out. So this is what we are going to be sharing with you. A very high level presentation, and then I think we'll be open to the questions, and then based on your feedback, we will further enrich it, enhance it, and we are equipped, we have the resources to cater your individual requests as well. So there's a lot of promises. Sometimes my staff is not very happy because I go around and make a lot of promises, but I am really passionate and excited about this initiative. So thank you very much. And these are the technical people who are going to run you through.
Crucial time when we need to embed or internalize planning, infrastructure planning, budgeting, resource allocations, and other things. We need to think about the applications or the technical application of the catastrophes. So for the technical input, for technical views, there are two experts with us. Mashal Riaz, Deputy Manager, GIS expert at NDRMF, and Mohammed Farhan Mehdi. They are preparing their presentation. So I would request both of them how technically they want to proceed for. Over to you. Thank you.
Okay, so Bismillah Rahman Rahim. So my name is Farhan, and I'm working with NDRMF in NatCat sector. So NatCat is basically is an initiative of disaster risk reduction. So before I formally put a picture of NatCat, like what is NatCat, I would like to put some sentences for what is basically risk. Because risk is the thing that NatCat, it's the motive of NatCat. So, so in 2022, Pakistan basically lost $40 billion in floods. That was approximately 12% of Pakistan's GDP at that time. So people call that just hazard, but we call that underestimated risk. So what is that risk? So risk is basically a mixture of three ingredients, which is hazard, exposure, and vulnerability. These three things basically form risk which NatCat uses in its analytics. There are two kind of approaches for in assessing the risk. There's a reactive approach and then there's a predictive approach. NatCat model is based on predictive approach. In reactive approach, what do? You say like, okay, $40 billion are lost. To recover that in the state of emergency, you reconstruct the things, and in that reconstruction process, things are even more expensive. They cost you 2 to 3 times even more, and you lose even more GDP at that time, and you depend on the international aid, and this process like takes 3 to 5 years to just recover, even not completely, but at to some extent. But in the predictive model, you invest in the assessment of the risk. Uh, that still costs, but less costs uh, than what you're going to lose actually. Uh, so you build basically a risk informed infrastructure, and you build early warning systems. NatCat is one of those things, this infrastructure we are talking about, and that helps you like reduce the impact of disaster by 60 to 80%. So let's go with the components that I previously showed you. So hazard is the how we define hazard. Hazard is basically any event that has tendency to uh, harm people, your property, or the environment. Uh, but hazard, you can have the flood in an empty land that won't cause any problem. Uh, here, what is the next ingredient? That is exposure. Exposure is basically what can get hit. I mean, what valuable assets, when you talk in the terms of economic, what valuable assets that fall under that hazard is what is called exposure. Then the third most important ingredient is vulnerability. Vulnerability is like if you take two buildings, one is one of them has weak infrastructure, one of them is good. So they both won't behave in the same way to the flood. They would to the earthquake or any hazard. So that's what we call physical vulnerability. Then we have social vulnerability, which is like, for example, you have heat waves in the region. So old people would get more affected than the young people. So these are the three things that basically forms the risk, which is hazard, exposure, and vulnerability. So this is our risk layer, one of the risk layer of flood. Uh, as you can see, like the areas which contribute more to the GDP are at high level of risks. As you can see, like the red regions, they are more prone to the flood hazards, uh, and like the Karachi, you can see is more prone to urban flooding, and which contributes 20% to Pakistan's GDP. So so collectively, Pakistan's 50% GDP is at risk. So what if you lose those, like you lost $40 billion in the 2022 floods? You basically lost the opportunities to build like 100 hospitals, like 1,000 kilometers of highways, and you did not even not only lost the GDP, but you also lose the GDP growth, because you lose the infrastructure that contributes to your GDP. So that's all the problem. So what's the solution to all this? Is basically the the planning tools that are required to basically enhance in the process of uh, government's economic decisions. Uh, so one of the tool is NatCat risk calculator, which I'm going to present you in its live demonstration. For now, we are basically covering 10 perils of hazards. One of them is riverine flood, earthquake, drought, wind cyclone, urban flooding, flash flood, heat waves, landslides, tsunami, storm surge. These all would not be covered for entire Pakistan because tsunami and storm surge would be only for the coastal areas, landsliding only for northern regions where landslides usually occur. Then heat waves is for all Pakistan. Flash floods for now is for Nari Basin in Balochistan. Then we have urban flooding for major cities, wind cyclone in central and southern regions of Pakistan, and drought for entire Pakistan for Rabi and Kharif crops. Earthquake again for entire Pakistan, and riverine flood for all major rivers. How this system basically works. Uh, Behind the scenes, we have simulation models and hazard modeling that keeps processing and gives you the final result that you display on the map as a GIS layers and stuff. Then you create the reportings or you query for your um, purpose, whatever you need for. This all like system is huge system which is in terabytes that needs to be placed somewhere because we are collaborating with different government organizations for loss estimation. We are acquiring data for buildings, for retrofitting data, for population loss. We're getting for population density data, and all those data uh, is a government data that needs security. So we are hosting basically all those stuff in our own another component NatCat data center. NatCat data center is currently present in the Nest, in a lab of Nest, which has high computational resource and provide physical security plus cyber security as well. Let's get to the demonstration of the NatCat risk calculator. Okay, so this is basically NatCat risk calculator. Uh, on the left top, you can select different kind of different granularity levels, which is province, district, tehsil. And then on the top, as you can see, 4 cards for hazard, exposure, vulnerability, and risk that I defined just a few minutes ago. And then on the left, you can select the different perils for visualization as well. And then there is another concept called return period. Return period is basically the probability of the occurrence of that certain hazard. Let's say let's say return period is 10. That means like it will occur once in 10 years. If the return period is 5, that means it will occur once in 5 years. So let's, for instance, select a province. So this is Punjab, basically with riverine flooding. I'll go one by one for each peril. Uh, in this hazard visualization, uh, this is just for as a first step. This is hazard visualization, not like we haven't reached yet exposure and vulnerability. Uh, you can see the hazard statistics on the right side, which shows like this much area is under very low, will be on very low flood depth, and this certain area would be on the very high flood risk. So this also shows you the intensity. The color coding also shows you the intensity. If you switch the return, if you change the return periods, you could see like uh, the extent of the flood layer is changing. That means like 5-year return period means this area will get hit by flood within 5 years. And 25 years mean this certain extent will uh, fall under 25 years of return period of flood. Now, this only this layer doesn't give us any kind of insight. So we can enable buildings layer on top of this. We can enable roads. We can enable schools. We can visualize different all the schools in that region. So we can visualize hospitals in that region, or we can visualize rabi crops. We can visualize kharif crops in that region. So if we just want to see the exposure statistics in that region, we can just click the exposure tab on the top, and we can see what numbers, absolute numbers, are falling under that certain. That is the risk layer. We'll get to that. So these are the exposure statistics. Like these things are under this much number is under exposed to this extent of flood. Uh, Other than this, we have, if we go to Balochistan, because we're covering the Nari Basin, so we can also visualize flash flood in that region. Let's get to Islamabad and see if we fall under the urban flooding. So this is basically Islamabad, which falls under urban flooding. Maybe this region is Qaeda University. You can also visualize this all things in 3D to getting more clarity. Plus we have, if we go to national, then we have earthquake as well. We have cyclone wind, as I've described for southern and central regions. Then we have landslides for all the northern regions, because it falls under the impact of that seismic zone. So we have a drought layer as well, and tsunami in the coastal regions. Storm surging as well in the coastal regions. Plus heat wave throughout the Pakistan. So I just showed you hazard and exposure. Now let's get to the vulnerability. This vulnerability I'm currently showing you is social vulnerability. The red region shows that people are more vulnerable. Social vulnerability means it's based on the age distribution, like where and more economic factors uh, like poverty index and stuff that forms a vulnerability index. We call that SOVI, social vulnerability index, as well. Uh, so if you we can also compare it with risk layer as well. So now coming to your point, where was that layer which showed you the red regions? These are basically distribution based on that hazard, exposure, and vulnerability, which shows you the risky regions, and also gives you the loss estimation that you might lose when this certain type of hazard occurs. For now, it's for riverine flood. For riverine flood, it's separate. For flash flood, as you can see, it's separate for each, yes. Plus giving you the loss estimation as well for each. Uh, Plus we are also in the loss estimation, we are getting the share of our assets. Like buildings is 19% on the risk, roads is 5% on the risk, rabi crops 32%, kharif crops 2%, and same like livestock. These are basically projections based on the previous data.
How many years back? Like for 5 years back or 10 years back or 1 year back?
Yeah.
Okay, so Farhan, if I mean, so these data sets are actually acquired from multiple sources. Thank you, Farhan. He has like walked you through the entire geospatial data sets and how you can say, the modeling that has been done in the context of the data that we had available. And whatever you have seen so far is basically what are the geospatial aspects or the statistical aspects of this model. So as Farhan mentioned, there are two ways to go about it. There are reactive models and then there are predictive models as well. You have collaboration with a number of universities and organizations. You may have heard the term multi-hazard vulnerability risk assessment, and then there are HVRAs, hazard vulnerability and risk assessments. So one of the general approach is to either have a single analysis for a single hazard that could be flood, drought, or whatever is prevalent in your area of interest. Or a second approach is to go about in a multi-hazard way, to assess each and every hazard that is prevalent in an area and to have a composite risk index for that. So in case of NatCat, what sets it apart from other models is that we have an economic component to it as well. The first step is generally to identify an area of interest. It could be the entire geographic territory of Pakistan, or it could be a particular district, or it could be a simple province. Because the entire geographic terrain of Pakistan is not, you can say it is not consistent, or it does not have a single set of hazards that are prevailing in every area. For example, if you go to GB, there are flash floods and GLOVs. And since one of the question came, why do we have frequent earthquakes in Karachi? We have different earthquake zones as well. We have Makran subduction zone in Balochistan and Sindh, which is one of the reasons for why we have frequent earthquakes there. Then we have a Suleiman Kirtha range, and then we have the Himalayas and Karakoram range in the northern area. So there are multiple sources and reasons why we have earthquakes in very different ways in different parts of Pakistan. Same goes for flooding. We have riverine flooding. Generally, there is a monsoon weather pattern, not so existent, not so prominent in winter now, but in July and August, and even in some weeks of September, we do have a prominent monsoon season. And in 2022 floods, one of the anomalies that was experienced was the cloudburst situation, a localized, you can say, rainfall that caused massive flood in Balochistan. And then we have the GLOV phenomena, the melting of glaciers in the northern areas that causes flash floods, that is for a very short period of time. So combining all of these hazards together and bringing it into a system, it requires data from multiple sources. Either we combine primary data sources, which is when you actually go to the ground and have surveys and collect data, or we rely on secondary data sources, statistical data, geospatial data from a number of open source satellites that are available by NASA, European Space Agency. So our project partners, in this case, PARCO, they collected data from multiple sources. For example, for population, we collected data from Pakistan Bureau of Statistics. And the last census that was conducted in Pakistan was in 2017, where it actually started. So the kind of data that we have available is from multiple sources, mostly government endorsed. Because if we go towards open source data, then there is another aspect of validating that data with the ground realities. And then in case of population and the infrastructure that we have available, we have projected values. So what happens is that if you go a step back, and we had the previous census in Pakistan in 1998, and ideally a census should be conducted within 10 years time period. But since we had almost a 20 years gap, so during those periods, whatever projects that were conducted that needed the population data used projected values. So what projected values are, that there is a growth rate at a province, at a district, at a tehsil, a Mauza level, and the gender segregated and age-wise segregated data that is collected by PBS, that is generally multiplied with the growth rate and projected values for any particular area used. So this model was actually consolidated back in 2023. So most of the data that is integrated is up to that time period, between 2021 to 2023. In case of multi-hazard vulnerability risk assessment, or even in case of NatCat or any other HVRA, the general step is to identify an administrative unit. It could be a district or province. In our case, we have the entire territory of Pakistan. Identify the hazards that are prevalent in that area. For instance, if we go towards Balochistan and Sindh, the nature of hazards is quite different than if you go towards Punjab or the northern areas. And then to have a probabilistic modeling for those specific hazards. So what is probabilistic modeling is that it takes into account each and every scenario that could be possible in that area. If we take the example of flood, In 2010 and 2022, we had a 100-year return period flood. A flood that has the likelihood of occurrence of based on the extent, the coverage that it was, it extended to more than 3 provinces and the kind of losses that it incurred. So it was a 1 in a 100-year return period flood. But other than that, we have had floods in 2011, 2012 that were more of a localized nature. So what Farhan already walked you through in the interface is that we calculated the probabilistic modeling for each and every return period that could be possible in Pakistan in terms of riverine flood. And for urban flooding, certain territories were chosen, mainly the provincial capitals and the federal capital. Same goes for earthquake and all the perils that we have included, basically divided into hydrometeorological and geophysical hazards, depending on the nature of their occurrence. And the second step is the exposure. Exposure is basically the interaction of these hazards with the elements at risk. And what are the elements at risk? It's the population, the infrastructure that could include schools, hospitals, any other critical infrastructure, energy sector, we have Rabi and Kharif crops, just to see which are the high priority areas in which the hazard layer is likely to cause more damage to these elements. The next step is the vulnerability assessment, in which we take into account the physical vulnerability, which is the vulnerability of building structures. We have like residential buildings, we have commercial buildings, and we have critical infrastructures like grid stations, nuclear power plants. So what we see in the physical vulnerability is how these perils, particularly flood and earthquake that have a direct impact on infrastructure, how do they affect? What is the extent of damage that they can be caused? And we take into account the kind of building material that is used. For instance, a building with concrete and reinforced masonry might be able to withstand an earthquake in comparison to a structure that is made of bricks and mud. And for social vulnerability, we see which are the most vulnerable groups in the areas that are highly exposed to any particular hazard. What is the household income, the poverty index, the size of the family, obviously availability of early warning and other resources that could likely increase or decrease the vulnerability of that particular area. So it is more of a community-based approach. And then we culminate all of this information to have a composite risk picture. Why is that risk picture important is for planning purposes. For instance, there are 2 crucial pieces of information that towards the end of the NatCat model we include are the average annual loss based on all the analysis that we have done, which are the expected annual economic losses from any specific hazard, calculated by averaging losses across thousands of simulated disaster scenarios, all the scenarios that we have already integrated into the model. And the second piece of information is the probable maximum loss, which is the maximum credible loss from a single catastrophic event, typically calculated at specific probability levels. We have different probability levels, as I explained in case of flood, riverine flood, we have 5, 10, 25, 100-year return period. In case of earthquake, we follow the building codes of Pakistan seismic provisions. So we have 25, 100, 475-year return period. So it is important to have these average losses for each and every scenario. And why it matters in case of Pakistan, before actually going into the slide, I think it would be important to share one practical application that we have already established. We have developed an interface for the Ministry of Planning, Development, and Special Initiatives for their project appraisal program. Because incurrence of losses, these values are only, you can say, important, or they are valuable once they are translated into actual programs, once they are translated or integrated into projects or policies. Otherwise, they are just figures. They are just numbers. They can look fancy, but they actually have to translate into something practical. So what that interface does is that it gives the Ministry of Planning, Development, and Special Initiative team access to the NatCat model, where they can see that if they have planned within their annual development plan, if they have actually planned a construction of a hospital or any particular public sector development project, does it lie in a high hazard zone? Is it vulnerable to any kind of shock or impact? And in case if it is, then they can also assess whether it would be feasible to go about it, to actually approve it and have it constructed in that particular area. And that interface is currently being used by the Ministry of Planning, Development, and Special Initiatives. Aside of that, the purpose of this seminar and a number of other seminars we have had is to actually integrate this model into a broader sense, not just the government or non-government agencies, but within the insurance sector, within the banking sector, and particularly in academia. Because in silos, there are a number of institutions that are working on the policy aspects. They are working on hazard vulnerability analysis. They are even working on the loss aspect of it. But we see what we have experienced is that there are a lot of gaps in terms of how the research can actually integrate into the policy and the planning process. There are a number of students that who exceptional research, but by the end of their degree program, nothing actually happens. It's just there. There's a publication, but that should actually translate into something practical. And one of the reasons why we are here today is to actually see how we can establish this collaboration between NDRMF and PIDE. How is it that this model can be, taken to the next level, taken into the version 2, in which we are including 2 more perils, smog and GLOF, glacial lake outburst flood for the northern areas, and how we can actually improve. This is not the end of the model, or this is not, we cannot say it's in a perfect sense. We need to improve this model and make it more, bring it more in line to what the ground realities are in Pakistan in terms of data integration, in terms of improving the modeling, or whether we have to translate these results into actual policy and planning. So why it matters in case of Pakistan for government, obviously smarter disaster planning and urban development, not just these 2 areas, but anything and everything can fall within a spectrum of disaster risk reduction and disaster risk financing or risk management. And for communities saving lives, livelihood, and infrastructure, obviously based on all the data that we have seen for last several years, particularly last 2 decades, the kind of losses that have been incurred, we do need resilient communities as as the frontline, barrier to minimizing these losses. For insurance, better pricing and coverage design, this is one of the initiatives, or the baseline for the disaster risk financing strategy for NDRMF to actually integrate this model within the insurance sector. And for stakeholders, targeted resilience investments, not just the insurance sector or government, it could be the international development partners, the World Bank, ADB, UN agencies, UNDP, as it was mentioned earlier, they are working on the climate finance and the risk financing aspects. So what we want is to have it integrated into areas where it matters. And all this exercise is not just merely to, to show someone that this is what has been done. It should be applied in a practical sense. So in case of PIDE, obviously this is something that should come from PIDE. Where do you see the applicability in the work that you do, that your students are doing, or where we can, together in a collaborative manner, play a better role in how do we take this initiative forward? This was just an introductory session. So what we envision is NatCat model provides the technical foundation, and PIDE provides the policy expertise. Now, this is something that PIDE would have to elaborate. The areas that you see that has a direct or maybe indirect application of the NatCat model within the work that you do or you plan to do. And together we can enhance Pakistan's disaster risk management. So this is something that it's a way forward that we have to decide among ourselves as researchers, as collaborators. So thank you very much. And that's the end of our presentation.
Thank you so much, Mashal, Riaz, and Farhan, Mehdi, for your wonderful presentation, excellent insights from the NetCat model. And you rightly pointed out that you are measuring the risk profile, and PIDE can provide the policy supports, and together we can build a better infrastructure planning or budgeting and resource allocation, all other things. Okay, but when you already highlighted that this is a predictive nature of model. So when predicting or making some predictions based on this, what were the data constraints? Because data constraints are always there, and especially the data constraints in the case of the remote areas, and how reliable this predictability to over those areas, how it will help the planning. The second question will be that because the climate risk is also evolving. I already talked about the climate, we are facing increased number of risks, intensity is also increased. So what is the capability of this model that how we can embed this evolving risk in this model, both if the frequency is increased or the intensity is increased, how capable is this model? Thank you.
Okay. So yes, data availability is one of the major constraints, given that this relies heavily on using geospatial and statistical data. So for any kind of modeling, it is important to have data from multiple sources. There are two ways to go about it. Either we have primary data collection, but if you're covering the entire geographic extent of Pakistan, it is nearly impossible to go each and everywhere and have that level of information from all the sectors that have been covered in NatCat or any other model that follows this path. And in secondary data sources, what is it's important is to rely on data sources that are already validated, because once you rely on open source data, which maybe we go for a road network that has been digitized by a really good researcher, but we have to validate it. Because the purpose of this model is to actually take it to the policymakers and stakeholders. And if the data that you are integrating has no validity, if there are errors within that data, then it means that your whole exercise is just null and void. You cannot really actually take it to the makers and say that we are confident. What we bring to you is actually authentic, and you can use it as a finished product to integrate it into your own work, whatever that may be. So in this case, and one of the reasons why it takes several months or years, if you're doing a national level project, is data collection, a huge part of it. One of the main barriers is that when you need data from multiple sources, especially government agencies, it could take several months, not just weeks, but it could take several months, because there are data sharing protocols. There are certain reservations about the nature of data, how is it going to be used for your model, and then whether you are going to share it with a third party or not. And there are a number of things that we have to take into consideration. So that is one of the major constraints, is to actually take that data and then to homogenize all of that data. Because if you have to use data from multiple sources, it has to be in a single format to actually put it into the model. Then when it comes to remote areas, we do rely on the satellite imagery that is provided by SPARCO, by NASA, European Space Agency, and all other consortiums that Pakistan is a part of, UN SPIDER. They do provide data on subsidized rates for emergency situations. But the problem with that is that they have satellites that have a certain temporal period. They might provide imagery for Pakistan 1 in 16 days. And if you want a coverage for the entire extent of Pakistan, and you want to have, you want to have analysis every 5 days, then you will have to rely on what is available. You work with what is available and then see how you can, fill the gaps based on any other secondary data sources. So these are some of the data constraints that are there, that anyone working with spatial and statistical data has to face, not just NDRMF, but any researcher or organization. And then there are models that we use that are developed for international situations. Now in Pakistan, as I said, we have a very dynamic landscape. We don't have a homogeneous hazard profile as well. It is something different in the north, entirely different in the southern regions. To bring that consistency and to integrate all of these things into a single model, and to make sure that the results that we have are actually close to the situation on ground in our country, all of these things have to be taken into account before we actually perform the final step and have these hazard layers that you see in the interface right now. So this is a very laborious, time-taking, and intensive exercise. And then once we do have the final layers, we have to validate it, while it is bringing the national and international experts to actually tweaking the results that we already have. Maybe there are some differences or anything. So all of these things are taken into account, were taken into account when NatCat was being developed, and it is a very common exercise for any kind of model that is being developed for Pakistan. So it takes several months, at times it takes several years to actually be established, and to bring it to this level, to actually take into to the stakeholders and say that, okay, this is what it is and this is how you can use it. And for the second question, I think I'll just refer it to Sir for the climate risk.
Yeah, thank you, Mashal. So this is integrated with the climate change models, which are internationally used model, and so the system is integrated, and we have the arrangements through Sparko, basically to update the system, and with the new models actually becoming available and fully integrated. Now, I think the one thing to understand is, being a probabilistic based model, I think the frequency of the data collection and then integration is not going to have a huge implication on the results, especially when we're talking about at the national level, and we are actually analyzing the results and the assessments at the national level for so many different kind of apparels as well. So I think in terms of the reliability, it doesn't really cost huge amount of doubt on the results and the outcomes, and similarly it applies on the, although Mashal, and in the presentation, and this is one of the challenge which we are facing as well, because the Pakistan's atmospheric condition at terrain is not extremely homogeneous, and that of course has the kind of challenges, but again it does not have those kind of implications. So especially when we are starting, and you do not have anything actually already put us on a very safe space and a convenient space in terms of utilizing this kind of a data. But then of course we need to sharpen it up and keep on sharpening it up with the new models which are coming internationally, with the new data sets which are becoming available. And for that actually we are making every effort to suck the data from wherever it's possible, acquire it, and then integrate it, and then keep on actually building on it. So internationally, regionally, as well as domestically as well. So we are very eagerly actually waiting, and the new PBS data from the last census. We have a meeting, I think, next week or this week, I believe. And once that data actually become the part of it, I think that is going to have, I wouldn't say the serious implication, but that is going to have some implications on the results, because the population size and the socioeconomic data and the other parameters, of course, going to have the implications on the exposure and the vulnerability as well. And we are actually very much looking forward to see those results as well. We might be actually coming back to share with you and allowing you to have a kind of a comparative analysis from this presentation and new presentation, and see how the layer or how the curve is actually moving up or down or right or left. I think this as researcher, I'm sure that you'll be very excited to see that.
Yes, definitely, definitely. We will also having a new agricultural census in few months, and definitely it will also help to make better prediction and better, and it will also help the better planning. So I will ask one question to Mr. Bilal Anwar, and then we will come towards our audience, both online and those who are present here in line. Please introduce yourself and be precise for your question. First, there are international commitments. The Pakistan have many international climate commitments. So, how NetCat model support Pakistan's climate commitments, especially the keeping in view the Sendai framework or the SDG 13, the climate action? So how this model can support Pakistan's planning, especially keeping in view the international climate commitments?
Yeah, quite powerfully and quite tremendously, I must say that. So in the third national communication, which is one of the biggest kind of a commitment or compliance requirement for any country under UNFCCC process. So there's a very strong reference or references in the third national communications. I think there's about a half a chapter about NetCat, and then there are references with regard to the other kind of systematic observations and transparency and DRR and a number of other elements as well. Similarly, under the BTR as well, we have been actually asked to provide some information, which we did, and I'm sure that they are preparing it as well. We are going to be, we are already actually hosting the GHG emission inventory as well from the Ministry of Climate Change, and that is going to be integrated into this system as well. And we need to kind of creatively see that how it actually interplays with this kind of a data. But I'm sure there are interaction, there are interlinkages which we need to see that as well. And similarly, number of other areas as well. Now, with the new kind of a compliance requirements or the reporting requirements, which are quite significant from the UNFCCC other institutions as well, we are actually making very strong efforts to have it integrated as well. And under the transparency mechanism, Article 13 of the Paris Agreement, similarly under the NDCs as well, we want this to be the basis of it. By the way, this places Pakistan, it may not look very complicated, and but this places Pakistan only like 9th or 10th country in the world, eighth country in the world which have such a comprehensive system of this nature and this scale. So there's only 8 other countries who have such a system. So this is quite a remarkable achievement by everyone and who has been actually engaged in this kind of work. So I think the system is in place now. We just have to see creatively, have to see kind of with a very open-mindedness that how we can create the inevitability of it. And why this is one of the reasons we are here. Actually, we might be missing. We might be actually blindsided by several things. I'm sure we are, and this is what we want to hear from your side.
Okay, thank you so much. And now the house is open. Those who have question, please raise your hand. Please be very precise and introduce yourself and ask your question.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Muhammad Tayyib, and I have recently joined as a research economist. My question is, as far as I have understood, that the NatCat model is actually a predictive model that predicts the future catastrophes based on the previous data. So could you please tell us that in terms of percentage, that how accurate these predictions could be?
Okay, thank you.
And also, we would also love to know about them because we are hearing a lot about the rainfall predictions this year. They are more than 100% or more than 60% more rains we will face in this season. And how will these rainfall will affect our economy and how this will turn into some disasters or other things? Please, if you have some calculations, then it will also very interesting for us.
Okay, so basically assessing the risk in a predictive way doesn't mean like we are saying like okay, on this date flood will occur. Predictive nature means like it basically tells you like this event will happen at this place and this loss will occur. In terms of accuracy, if you're talking about this is the probabilistic model. And if you talk about in terms of probability, so probability is already not falls under the accuracy. So when we talk about the risk assessment, we don't talk about the accuracy, but we talk about the approach. That how good is your approach in the assessment of risk? It will never be accurate as you might be thinking like, okay, in 5 years, the flood will occur at this place. The risk assessment does not mean because then again, that accuracy or the rainfall is the reactive approach. Like, okay, this happens, then you put the money in and then you try to recover. This predictive approach basically saves you from taking care of when certain events occur.
Okay, this is a very common question actually, because the people here have some kind of a unique kind of a romance with the predictions, and any prediction in the world loses its accuracy after 15 days. In human lives, it's actually less than that. So I might not be able to finish answering your question. That's how unpredictable it is or uncertain it is. Now, I think that the distinction to create is between the prediction or predictability and the risk assessment. Now, you can assess the risks for maybe 100 years or 200 years or 400 years, what you have seen in the shape of the return period. Whereas prediction has a very short life. And I think this is a distinction which is extremely important to create in our heads. And it's extremely important for research purposes. I think while you're actually finishing your research paper, that prediction is already outdated. It's of no value. It's zero. It should be thrown into the bin. That's it. But for risk, you can actually calculate it for maybe 100 years or 200 years as well. You can assess the risk as well. Now, what is the value of it? Because when we are actually talking about the policy making, when we are talking about the infrastructure development or fiscal resilience or economic management, you don't take the 15 years or 15 days or 30 days into consideration. You take 25 years into consideration, or you take 50 years into consideration. This model's beauty lies and the strength lies in the risk assessment, not the prediction. I think about the weather, there are several people actually, other than NDMA as well these days, who are actually predicting it for you quite conveniently and sometimes glamorously as well, actually. And they're doing a beautiful job, I must say that, because to make the weather glamorous, I mean, you need a special skills actually, and they are actually doing that. So I think the understanding is it's a probabilistic based risk assessment model or risk analysis model. Okay, I think you've seen a kind of a very brief reference in the presentation for the insurance industry. I think that's a very unique kind of an example, and we are making a lot of effort to make our inroads into the insurance industry in Pakistan. And by the way, the best models, NetCat type of models, have been developed and are being used by Swiss Re, Hanover Re, Allianz, and those kind of insurances of the world. And they have the most advanced models, because I think this is that's how they actually assess their risks, because they are in the risk assessment business. That's the core of their business, to assess the risk and actually to put up with the products and the services and calculate the premiums and the price the premiums and things like these. And that actually applies with the economic development and economic planning as well. So I think it's important to create that kind of a distinction in our heads, and this is a kind of education which we are trying to kind of promote in the country right now. Thank you.
वचुल्ला फ़हीम फ्रॉम पाइट। सर मेरा क्वेश्चन ये है कि रिसेंटली मैं और डॉक्टर फैसल साहब ने गिलगित बाल्टिस्तान डिज़ास्टर मैनेजमेंट अथॉरिटी का हमने एवेल्युएशन किए, तो हमें ये मालूम हुआ कि वहाँ पे कोई डिज़ास्टर रिस्क असेसमेंट या वल्नरेबिलिटी असेसमेंट नहीं हो रहा है, और आप लोगों की जो नेटकैट मॉडल है उसमें ग्लोफ है नहीं, तो मैं इसको कैसे कह सकता हूँ कि जीबी के इफेक्टिव है या नहीं है? और मेरा दूसरा क्वेश्चन ये है कि आप लोगों के पास अगर डेटा सेट है तो आप लोग डिस्ट्रिक्ट वाइज कोई रैंकिंग किया हुआ है आप लोगों ने?
ओके, सो जीबी के केस में हमारी जो कवरेज है ग्लॉफ के लिए, असेसमेंट अभी ऑनगोइंग है, जिसमें हम 32 ग्लॉफ इवेंट्स या ग्लेशियर्स जो हैं उनको फोकस करेंगे। ये एक ऑनगोइंग एक्सरसाइज है। बेसिकली नैटकैट का एक पहला फेज़ था जिसमें 9 to 10 पैरल्स को कवर किया गया था, और अभी उसका एक सेकंड फेज़ चल रहा है जिसमें ग्लॉफ और स्मॉग को इंक्लूड किया गया है। सो इन केस ऑफ ग्लॉफ, क्योंकि नॉर्दर्न एरियाज़ में एक तो डेटा कवरेज की, दूसरी ये कि ग्लॉफ के नेचर में प्राइमरी सर्वे मोरेन डैम का करना बहुत ज़रूरी होता है टू इस्टेब्लिश अ सिनेरियो। प्रोबेबिलिस्टिक मॉडलिंग पे हम ज़्यादातर सैटेलाइट डेटा पे रिलाई करते हैं, जो कि हमें नेशन वाइड कवरेज भी दे देता है। लेकिन ग्लॉफ क्योंकि बहुत लोकलाइज्ड इवेंट्स होते हैं और जिसमें एक फॉर एग्जांपल हसनाबाद में शिशपर ग्लेशियर का अगर मैं जिक्र करूं तो उस पर काफ़ी काम हो भी चुका है, लेकिन दिस इज़ वन ऑफ द मोस्ट यू कैन से वल्नरेबल लोकेशंस। तो उसके लिए जो डेटा कलेक्शन के पैरामीटर्स होते हैं वो बाकी प्रोबेबिलिस्टिक मॉडलिंग से थोड़े डिफरेंट होते हैं। सो अभी ये एक ऑनगोइंग एक्सरसाइज है, अंटिल दिसंबर ग्लॉफ और स्मॉग की जो असेसमेंट है वो कंप्लीट होगी, उसके बाद उसे नैटकैट मॉडल में इंटीग्रेट किया जाएगा। डिस्ट्रिक्ट इंडिकेटर्स हमारी एक डिस्ट्रिक्ट रैंकिंग है, हैजर्ड वाइज वल्नरेबिलिटी वाइज रैंकिंग है, जैसे अभी फरहान मेरे कोलीग ने आपको दिखाया था कि एक सोवी की भी रैंकिंग है फिजिकल वल्नरेबिलिटी की। मोस्ट रिसेंटली मार्च से लेके मई के बीच में यूएन ओचा ने अपनी एक एक्सरसाइज की थी 36 वल्नरेबल डिस्ट्रिक्ट्स ऑफ पंजाब। अब जीबी के लिए नहीं, क्योंकि हीट वेव का एक और ड्राउट का जो पैरामीटर था वो उनकी तरफ से आया था, वो सिर्फ पंजाब के लिए वो एक्सरसाइज करे थे, सो दैट वाज देयर रिक्वायरमेंट। एनडीआरएमएफ की तरफ से उन्हें ड्राउट, हीट वेव और फ्लड की डिस्ट्रिक्ट वाइज रैंकिंग प्रोवाइड की गई, और उसकी बेसिस में उन्होंने डिस्ट्रिक्ट डिजास्टर मैनेजमेंट अथॉरिटीज़ के साथ मिलके एक मिटिगेशन प्लान बनाया था मॉनसून सीजन के लिए। सो दिस इज़ वन ऑफ द मोस्ट रिसेंट एप्लीकेशन ऑफ NatCat at district level.
Thank you, sir. This is Dr. Zishan. I'm from PIDE. लास्ट टाइम पाइड ने सेमिनार अरेंज किया था डॉक्टर सिजाद ने, तो मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ क्लाइमेट चेंज के काफ़ी एक्सपर्ट्स आए हुए थे। तो उन्होंने कहा था कि दे मेक, आपने भी मेंशन किया जैसे आप ग्रीन हाउस गैसेस की इन्वेंट्री बनाने के लिए उनके साथ कोऑपरेट कर रहे हैं। तो उनके जो डायरेक्टर थे उन्होंने कहा कि मैंडेट नहीं है मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ क्लाइमेट चेंज का इन्वेंट्री बनाने का। तो जब भी हमसे डोनर कहते हैं, यूएनएफ ट्रिपल सी हमसे रिक्वेस्ट करता है तो हम उनके लिए इन्वेंट्री बनाते हैं, लेकिन हमारा मैंडेट नहीं है कि हम स्पेसिफिकली हर साल की इन्वेंट्री बनाएं। इसीलिए इन्वेंट्री में गैप है। लास्ट टाइम जो इन्वेंट्री थी वो 2018 की थी, तो अभी 22 की और 23 पे काम कर रहे हैं। तो इस तरह से गैप्स हैं, इसी वजह से हर साल की एनुअल इन्वेंट्री हमारे पास आती नहीं है। जब भी इन्वेंट्री आती है उसमें 4-5 साल का गैप होता है। तो इसको एक इस सिस्टमेटिक फ्लॉ को आप कैसे कम करेंगे?
I think my response might have been a little bit not clear. So we are only hosting, we're providing the hosting services to the Ministry of Climate Change for their inventory data. And we're not really directly engaged in the data. But what we are saying, since we have the access to the data, how this data can be useful in the broader picture of the data which we have. So this is, I think this is one answer to that. Now, second is, it's not entirely correct if anyone from the Ministry of Climate Change said that not their mandate. It is their mandate. And this mandate is not driven by the donor. UNFCCC is not a donor. UNFCCC is international convention like Sendai framework. So they do not write checks for any country, actually. They do not have money for that kind of purposes. So it's a convention, and the UNFCCC is basically a secretariat to that convention. And by the signatory of that convention, it is compliant on Pakistan to prepare the GHG emissions inventory. Now, GHG emission inventory does not need to be annual. It does not really make sense because it's not really going to be making a huge difference in terms of the inventory information. I know a number of new people get added, a number of new cars get added as well, agriculture practices changes as well, biomass changes as well, a number of other parameters, yes. But you know, when you're talking about a national level kind of a system, it doesn't really make a significant implication. So 3 years inventory in case of Pakistan, I think that is good enough. And many countries actually around the world, they are actually following these kind of practices as well, and which is the case with Pakistan as well. So I don't really think that, you know, it's gaps there, or because of the frequency of the compilation of the inventory that actually it actually results into the gaps. This is not the case, but the inventory information need to be improved anyway, and that is improving actually over the period. If you look at the emission factor they're using, I think they're this time, if not mistaken, from tier 2 they have moved to tier 1. The emission factor that already make a huge, quite a significant progress as well. So I don't think, and this is not a part of this system. We just provided them the hosting services, and we have that data as well. I don't know whether that data is going to be useful for us or not, but we are going to be looking into how it can be integrated and made useful. The other thing that the gentleman at the end, actually, he asked about the information or the resilience kind of the work which we're doing at the district level. And yes, I think we have to see that this is the first step. This is the first time actually this kind of information and data has been collected in the country. And this is, I wouldn't say that this is a small first step. It's quite a leapfrog. You know, kind of a moving of scattered data in so many different places, and then not really having any access to the data. I think this is something quite a kind of advancement if you look from that perspective. Now, the two things I just want to add while I'm speaking is Mashal already mentioned about the graph, and because the uniqueness of the data, which is in the measurements which are required, and we are having a lengthy discussions with Sparko about that, you know, and graph is very unique to Pakistan as well, you know, and you know the reasons. So the quantification and the data compilation is going to be quite a cumbersome job. And we have set a deadline of December 2025, and we are very much committed to actually complete by December 2025. So you are going to be seeing that kind of integrated into the paras as well. Now, the two other things which we are adding as part of the enhancement or extension of NetCat, which we have agreed with the Sparko. So one is which is a lot more kind of applicable to your scope of work, and that is for the economic losses. You know, right now the economic losses or the loss estimation is actually based on the physical damages and the losses. And now we are actually moving toward the economic losses as well, you know, in case of the economic livelihood loss and those kind of areas. And the other thing is, for which we're still actually thinking, and we might actually need help from PIDE, is non-economic losses, you know, which are the social losses, the livelihood damages, losses, the well-being and the comfort level, and the distance which people need to cover in after a loss, after a disaster, in order to go to school, and education and cognitive losses, and things like these. And that is also in the pipeline in terms of integrated the system.
My question is that how we can handle the man-made risks. Like there are different restaurants, different businesses. They are being constructed on the path in the natural pathways of the rivers. So when there are some, that also causes the loss of lives, loss of the property. So can this NatCat be helpful in this aspect or not?
It might be a little bit, I might be a little bit biased, but I think it can be helpful. And so one of the steps which we are taking is what you refer to is a regulation enforcement challenge. It's a governance issue.
Can be urban planning or like that.
Yes, and so I think we have in Pakistan actually there's a regulation almost for everything, and sometimes I feel that okay, I mean there's over regulation for almost everything as well, and that of course have its own economic and other kind of implications as well. So enforcement challenges are very much there, and I think there's a favorite kind of example to quote. There's a hotel in Suhat which actually goes down almost every year, and miraculously come up again as well every year. I don't know how. मुझाती तौर पे वो दोबारा से भी आ जाता है. Okay, but I think what is our job is we're not an enforcement agency, we're not a regulatory agency as well. But I think what we can do is we are actually engaging with, and we are going to be holding kind of sessions with, for example, Pakistan Council of Engineers. And they can actually look at it and educate them and highlight to them and alert them and maybe harass them a little bit as well. And just to highlight that, okay, you know, the cost of inaction is so much and so, and the cost of not applying the regulation or not applying the standard, the building codes and those kind of initiatives, this can be quite alarming as well. And then help them a little bit with them in terms of upgrading their building codes, their regulations, and this and that. So we want to actually go toward the regulations, enforcing the regulations, strengthen the regulation. If you allow me, I would say from the back door, because if we do enter from the front door, I think we'll be knocked out and we'll be pushed out as well. So this is something which we are actually doing it. So our goal and role is educating and making them aware, and then showing them a pathway. Like we're doing for the insurance industry, we're doing for the PDMAs and NDRMF and several others as well. And we'll continue to do so, like we're doing for today for PIDE. So I think this is our role, and you know we'll do it in a kind of a excited manner.
Okay, we have almost 10 minutes, so two very quick questions that because climate risk and you are also working on climate finance side, so on both sides. What is the scope of climate risk insurance and what is the potential? Because the different nature of climate risk in Pakistan, we see the demand also exists We study in different areas, the demand exists, but the supply side is almost non-existent, and due to the different nature of the risk. So what is the scope and potential for climate risk insurance in this scenario? And second, what are the opportunities based on this NatCat model estimations? How much climate finance we can attract globally within country? Thank you.
Okay, let me first take an opportunity to promote myself. So read the blog on NDRMF website, which I wrote, or read an article in Business Recorder, which came out actually, I think a couple of days ago or 3-4 days ago. Okay, that's enough actually. Let's come to your question. But those two actually pieces of the writing actually addresses those two exactly the question actually, and that's the reason I'm saying it. Okay. Okay, talking about the potentials. You all are economists. I happen to be an economist as well. Can somebody, let me throw a question to you actually. And everywhere in the world, historically, with the GDP growth, the insurance penetration have increased. I have failed to find any other case except Pakistan, where with the GDP growth, the insurance penetration have diminished. Why? Now, people come up with a fashionable or very oversimplified answers, and they say that, oh, because of the religious reasons, because of the cultural reasons. And being an economist, I have to believe everything is driven by economics. Otherwise, I'm in a wrong profession. And I believe I'm not in a wrong profession. So why does it happen in Pakistan? The insurance penetration is less than 1%. So 99% is the potential. Simple sa jawab hai. Well, that's maybe another way of looking at it as well. So I think, okay, but I mean, there are several ways to address this question. The one is that, okay, insurance has not picked up, and there are structural issues for that. There are deep-rooted economic and social and structural challenges for that. It's not only religion. It's not only हमारा मौलवी जो कहता है जी नहीं मौत तो बरहक है वो है कि उसमें कोई शक नहीं है. But I think still there are reasons for that. Now, I think the other thing is, I mean, the bigger challenge is what is happening right now is whenever a disaster strike, then the government basically divert the financing from wherever is possible. So, and then it is basically allocated for relief, recovery, and those kind of elements in the immediate afterwards of the disaster, and then it goes on for the rehabilitation purposes as well. So what happens is, and then I do not need to really spell it out to you people that what kind of economic implications it has down the road when the social sector financing funding in a significant way is diverted for a number of years. This kind of the work as well. So the fiscal resilience or the financial resilience which we're talking, it just cannot be achieved until some of that risk is actually is addressed through some other means. And the other means is risk transfer mechanism or the insurance mechanism. And one of the primary objectives of this system is for the insurance purposes. And we are actually working for that. And we are working that we come up with a, I think I'm talking too much. Okay, I stop here.
Ji, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Faisal, for really nicely conducting this session. And thank you for presenting a very elaborate and detailed model. Some of the queries have just been answered, but my quick question or thought from you is, you have talked about it, that the government actually work like an insurer in this case where they're going to divert resources. But do you see any possibility of the government also moving to cat bond development based on your model? Because they can think of financing, not necessarily cutting down their necessary expenditures, they can also think about resourcing. Second question, which is, I think, more broad from this perspective, that based on your model, have you identified any gaps? Because the disaster is not always when the disaster has happened. Practically, the disaster risk management should start from the preparedness, as you've also talked about awareness in terms of the building architecture, individuals. So have you identified the financing needs which are required pre-disaster in order to mitigate the potential losses to a certain extent. Because we know that if we let the disaster happen, maybe that's more costlier on average as compared to if we improve the water channels embankment or some other kinds of mechanism. So have you considered evaluating the financing needs required for pre-disaster management strategies? These are the two quick questions: cat bond and financing gaps for mitigating the potential risk.
I'll answer the question related to the pre-disaster financing gaps. So when it comes to the entire spectrum of disaster management in Pakistan, there are certain organizations that are already working under the mandate. The National Disaster Management Authority and the Provincial Disaster Management Authorities in all the provinces, they are mainly responsible for the pre-disaster financial need identification, particularly during the monsoon season, because this is one of the consistent situations that we face regularly. But other than that, it is the mandate of those government organizations to identify the monetary needs. One of the examples being there is a National Disaster Management Fund that is already allocated within the annual budget by Government of Pakistan. And that is particularly used in case of any disaster that has occurred already. But it is the, you can say it is the mandate or it is the decision of that particular disaster management organization to divert that fund into mitigation or preparedness activities. Another example is the Federal Flood Commission is mainly responsible for providing a plan in case of riverine flooding for mitigation and pre-disaster structural and non-structural projects that would actually help in minimizing the damages in case of riverine flooding. So currently, Pakistan is implementing the National Flood Protection Plan 4th. The first one was, it is a 10-year plan, which was initiated back in 1970s, and then we had subsequent plans that were revised based on the lessons learned from the previous ones. So currently, it is their mandate to identify if any kind of financial needs are required for structural mitigation in terms of construction of embankments or any other non-structural measures that could potentially be useful to minimize any kind of loss to infrastructure or human lives. So for the CAT bonds, I think Sir will answer the question.
We're working for a range of financial instruments, and in the disaster risk financing, we basically distribute or divide the instruments between low frequency, high impact events, or the vice versa, the other way around. And the CAT bonds normally actually falls into the areas which actually is in between where the risk is retained by the government for a number of reasons as well. And the CAT bonds actually falls into where the government is actually providing that kind of a sovereign guarantee at the back of the CAT bond, and then they are actually bringing the private sector or the corporate sector for the mobilization of the resources as well. Pakistan's macroeconomic condition right now is improving, and that's actually good news actually. And it is not, I mean, about 6 months ago or slightly more when we started looking into it. And we were actually advised and we analyzed ourselves as well. The macroeconomic condition may not be such a suitable that we can actually float the CAT bonds and then get the kind of the market response which we should be expecting. But that definitely is one of the financial instruments which is very nicely placed up there on the table, and which is going to be becoming operational at some point in time. And I think with the macroeconomic conditions improving and the climatic conditions actually becoming worse, I think we might actually have to reach out to that box sooner than later. So definitely, and then again, the NetCat is actually going to be helping us because the CAT bond is always, or actually the risk assessment is needed to be at the back of it. That's where the investor actually like to make their decisions. So they are primarily actually based on the risk and that risk assessment and risk analysis, and that actually currently only NetCat can provide them.
We are lucky you have here, so I will ask as many questions I have. So because we are talking about financing, So what is the financing model for in your model? Like who will ensure the financing? Will the government ensure financing or the commercial banks ensure the financing? That's the first question. Second, what is the scale of financing? For the insurance financing? How much money do we need for the overall insurance against the climate change, problems? Thank you.
Very quickly, because the question is very complex, and I think it's, as I said, it's complex because we're talking about different insurance products, different services. We're talking about crop insurance, public asset insurance, or micro insurance for the underprivileged, and similarly number of other insurance products as well. And so every insurance need to kind of work out its own risk assessment, risk profiling, and come up with the premium pricing and things like that. I think it's a government decision, and for which they have to basically prioritize it. And the kind of indications and the advice which we're receiving from the government, they want to actually start off with the crop insurance and the crop insurance for the small farmers. And that's what we actually started working right now. In terms of the how much financing is going to be needing, I think that again is not so far actually figured out, and then again actually depends on number of factors, what coverage, how big the scale, and what is the reinsurance kind of a premium which the country can absorb, or the international reinsurers can be absorbed. Now, the one thing, I think there was an earlier question, I just want to make it clarify, is no matter how well watertight insurance products we have, or the reserve funds we are able to accumulate, and different kind of instruments, if we all actually become fully functional, fully operational, there is still an element of residual risk, and that remains up there. Some risk is never covered, and that's where the government becomes actually a last insurer. And so the role of the government actually always remains from bottom to the top. So I think this is very clear in the US, where the insurance, the crop insurance, other kind of similar type of insurance are in operation for last 50 years. And it still is actually the state government or the federal government stands behind as the one who's taking up the residual risk. So this is the nature of game in which we are in.
Okay, but बहुत अच्छी बहुत खूब है वंडरफुल डिस्कशन और नरेटिविंग की बहुत ज़्यादा हम टाइम भी अभी क्रॉस कर चुके हैं एंड so now I will request our director of research Dr. Shujat Farooq for the final comments, views and the vote of thanks.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Bilal Saab, Madam Mashal and Farhan Saab, really thankful, really we honored to host you at PIDE, and I think it was a wonderful discussion where you have mapped a number of risks and you have developed a risk assessment at the district level. So I think there are ample opportunities for PIDE for certain collaboration to take this model at the policy level. And second, I think, as you have mentioned, that we can add certain input on social side and other well-being side. And there are certain other, I think, where PIDE can further help you in developing this model, because like, for example, institution like you hold the model that suits your organization, and similarly, that PIDE must have an economic model. So right now, that economic model is incomplete without climate changes. So for example, when we see there are certain estimation that, in next 5 to 6 years, we require some $350 billion climate financing. And second, that earlier, around 2 decades ago or 3 decades ago, there was concept of sustainable development. But now, unless we not integrate the climate changes in this sustainable development is totally incomplete, because annually Pakistan is facing around 18 to 20% GDP growth losses only due to climate changes. They are in agriculture sector, they are in industry, health, education, etc., etc. So I think there is an ample opportunity where Zishan Saab work on input-output model. So you can integrate these, that climate risks in your model. Second, जो आपने इंश्योरेंस की बात की, देखें जी, you have to take the start. आपने स्टार्ट लेना है, यू हैव टू क्रिएट द डिमांड. फॉर एग्जांपल वी हैव द मेट्रोलॉजी डिपार्टमेंट, परहैप्स एनुअल रेवेन्यू जनरेशन इज हार्डली 10 मिलियन. और सऊदी अरेबिया में चले जाएं तो इट्स टोटली कॉस्ट बेनिफिट मॉडल, जहाँ पे वो रेवेन्यू जनरेट कर रहे हैं. सो उन्होंने उसको टोटली एक बिजनेस के परस्पेक्टिव में मर्ज किया है. फॉर एग्जांपल वेयर देयर इज सम बिल्डिंग, वेयर देयर इज एनी एक्टिविटी, इट इज़ मैंडेटरी कि आपने इंफॉर्मेशन वेदर की लेनी है. सो आपको डिमांड क्रिएट करनी है. तो यहाँ पे फिर गवर्नमेंट का रेगुलेशंस का रोल आता है कि जी कि हाउ दिस रिस्क असेसमेंट दैट कैन स्ट्रेंथन इन रेगुलेशन. तो मेरे ख्याल से पाइड में जो आप आए हैं बहुत अच्छा लगा है, और स्पेशली रिसर्चर्स के लिए तो डाटा इज़ गोल्ड माइन. ठीक है जी. तो ये डाटा है वेयर आई थिंक हम बहुत सा इकट्ठे काम कर सकते हैं. और जो फ्यूचर में आपने एक रिस्क असेसमेंट कर लिया है, दैट्स वंडरफुल. बट वही चीज़ है कि अब इसको आगे लेके चलना है. जो आपने कहा कि वी रिक्वायर इंटीग्रेशन, इंटीग्रेटेड अप्रोच, टेक्नोलॉजी इज़ देयर. और आपने फ्यूचर में जिस तरह अब बहुत से जेंडर बजटिंग की बात हो रही है, शायद आपको अब क्लाइमेट बजटिंग की ज़रूरत है. एंड यू हैव, और जिस तरह आपने स्टार्ट में कहा कि जी कि देयर आर टू अप्रोचेज. एक तो है कि फ्लड आए, बैठे रहें, गुजर जाए, लॉसेज हो जाए, और फिर आप असेसमेंट करना शुरू कर दें. एंड सेकंड इज़ कि आप अपनी प्रोएक्टिव अप्रोच ऑप्ट करें कि जी कि आपने लॉसेस को मिनिमाइज करना है. फिलीपाइन को देख लें कंपेयर विद पाकिस्तान, कि वहाँ पे बहुत ज़्यादा कैटास्ट्रॉफी है, बट दे हैव बिल्ड द इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर के जो उनके शॉक्स को एब्जॉर्ब कर रहे हैं. और हमने शायद 2010 और 2022 के दो फ्लड में $75 बिलियन से ज़्यादा के इकोनॉमिक लॉसेस किए हैं. सो गोइंग फॉरवर्ड आई थिंक ये पॉलिसी लेवल पे, प्लानिंग लेवल पे, बजटिंग लेवल पे, बिल्डिंग क्लाइमेट रिजिलियंट इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर, वेदर इट इज़ हार्ड और सॉफ्ट, दैट इज़ वेरी नेसेसरी. कोविड एक शॉक नहीं था. आप देखें कोविड के अंदर एक साल के अंदर शायद कई बच्चे होंगे जिनकी सारी उम्र की जो लाइफ टाइम अर्निंग है वो कंप्रोमाइज़ हो गई हैं. इसी तरह अगर आप 2022 के फ्लड को देखें सिंध में, ये तकरीबन आपके जो 15-20 अजला थे सिंध के, वो एक साल से ज़्यादा वहाँ पे स्कूल क्लोज रहे हैं. तो कितने बच्चे होंगे कि जो फॉर एवर आउट ऑफ स्कूल चले गए हैं, जिनकी लाइफ टाइम अर्निंग और अगली इंटर जनरेशनल पावर्टी उनने फेस की है. सो ये वो इंटीग्रेटेड चीज़ें हैं वेयर आई थिंक आपका ये मॉडल जितना और ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस में लेके जाएंगे, मॉडल आपका रिफाइन होगा, डाटा अपडेट होगा. सो आई थिंक दैट्स अ गुड असेसमेंट. एंड लेट्स द गवर्नमेंट और जितने भी पॉलिसी साइड पे है वो फिर इसको प्रैक्टिकली यूज़ करें. अदरवाइज़ ये नहीं कि हम जस्ट डिस्ट्रिक्ट लेवल पे इंफॉर्मेशन ले लें, डाटा इज़ देयर, सारी चीज़ें इंफॉर्मेशन है, लेकिन हमने बजटिंग अपनी मर्जी की करनी है कि जी वही हमने 4 शहरों के अंदर लगाना है. जिस तरह अब NFC अवार्ड आया है, तो 18th अमेंडमेंट के बाद आप देखें प्रोविंसेस अमीर हो गए, लेकिन वो डिस्ट्रिक्ट आपकी वल्नरेबिलिटी शायद उसी तरह की आज भी है जो आज से 15-20 साल थी. सो परहैप्स आपको ये जो डिसेंट्रलाइजेशन है और रिसोर्स फ्लोर एट राइट प्लेस, दैट इज़ रिक्वायर्ड. सो बिलाल साहब, रियली थैंकफुल you and your team. We are quite humble and looking for collaboration.